She sat quietly at the edge of the cafeteria, elbows on the table, pretending to write in her notebook while the others laughed around their lunches. No tray, no lunchbox, not even a water bottle. Just that same old backpack she never let out of sight. On the fourth day, Mr. Harris noticed the way her eyes followed the food line. Not something urged him on, some quiet scream echoing through his instincts. He opened it just slightly, enough to see the first few lines. No doodles, no math notes. Just one sentence written over and over across several pages. If I eat today, will Mom eat tomorrow? The pen strokes were deep, carved hard into the paper as though pain alone wasn't enough without the pressure behind it. His stomach turned. The door creaked and he quickly zipped her bag, returning it to the bench before she came back to collect it. She gave him a forced smile, her eyes hiding a universe of exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely a breath. Mr. Harris smiled back but said nothing. His throat was tight. He watched her walk away, too light on her feet, like someone whose body had forgotten how full felt. He told himself it could be coincidence, but deep inside, he already knew it wasn't. Back in the teacher's lounge, he stared at the coffee machine, unable to drink. His colleagues chatted about lesson plans and weekend plans, but their words faded into a dull hum behind the storm building in his head. He pulled up her student file, basic info, a phone number that never answered, and a home address that looked far from school. His finger hovered over the report button, but this wasn't something you fix with paperwork. He needed to know more before the system turned her into a statistic. The next day, he watched more closely. She arrived early again, too early, and stayed in the library before school started. At lunch, she followed the same pattern. Sit, pretend, smile. But that time she didn't notice he'd slipped a granola bar into her desk drawer. She looked around before opening it and stared at the bar like it was some kind of trap. She didn't eat it. Just zipped it into her backpack and sat, still the rest of the period. That crushed him more than if she'd thrown it away. Later that afternoon, he followed discreetly as she walked home, not to stalk, but to understand. It was a long walk, nearly an hour out of town, past broken sidewalks and boarded-up shops. She turned into a narrow alley beside a laundromat, then disappeared into a small building with cracked windows and no doorbell. Mr. Harris stood there for a long moment, heart thudding, realizing this wasn't just poverty, it was survival, in shadows. She wasn't being ignored by the world. She was hiding from it. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying her quiet, "Thank you," the empty desk, the journal, the wrapper. It all painted a picture no teacher wants to admit is real. A child wasting away silently in a room full of people too distracted to see her. The next morning, he arrived before anyone else. This time, he placed a sandwich and a small juice box in her desk. No note, no explanation. Just there. When she found it, her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She looked around, then tucked it away again, unopened. He wanted to ask her why she wouldn't eat, why she couldn't accept help, but he knew the answer before she could ever say it. Pride, fear, loyalty to a family she was trying to protect. Some kids carried books. She carried the weight of survival, the kind you don't speak about, the kind you don't even name. Mr. Harris sat at his desk, trying to hold himself together, wondering how many other desks and how many other classrooms held kids like her. How many other journals were filled with quiet suffering? The turning point came unexpectedly during a fire drill. As the students filed out, she stumbled slightly, not fainting, but close. He rushed over without drawing attention and helped steady her. She smiled again, embarrassed. "I'm fine," she said. But he felt how cold her hand was, how brittle her bones felt beneath the sleeve. It wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. And that night, he made his decision. She didn't ask for help. Not because she didn't need it, but because somewhere along the way, she learned that asking was dangerous. Help came with questions, and questions brought people, and people sometimes made things worse. So she perfected the art of invisibility, smiling just enough to not seem sad, talking just enough to not seem withdrawn. Her innocence wasn't in her age or her smile. It was in her belief that she could protect her mother just by pretending she was okay. Every skipped lunch was a shield, a silent sacrifice meant to feed someone else. At home, her mother worked 2 jobs and came home exhausted, shoes soaked, fingers raw from washing dishes at the diner. They barely spoke at night, not from distance, but from fatigue so deep it swallowed conversation. The girl would wait until her mother slept, then heat water on the stove and pour it into empty bowls, pretending they had soup. She'd place it near her mom's bedside to give the illusion they'd eaten. It was a ritual, a lie told out of love. No child should know hunger like this. No child should have to fake comfort just to keep her mother from breaking. The clothes she wore were always clean but worn. Shoes a size too small, soles nearly gone. She never complained. Not when kids whispered, not when teachers asked if she was okay. She'd mastered the art of deflection, a cheerful nod, a distracted laugh, always circling around the truth but never landing on it. Mr. Harris began noticing how she always volunteered to clean, to erase the board, to stack chairs, quiet ways of earning invisibility. It wasn't because she wanted attention. It was because she didn't want anyone to look close enough to see through her. Even in her pain, she gave. One day, Mr. Harris watched as another student dropped their pencil case. Everyone kept walking, but she turned, knelt down, and gathered every pencil with care. When the boy grunted a thank you and walked off, she smiled, like that tiny act was enough to make her day better. That's when it hit Mr. Harris. Her innocence wasn't weakness. It was a quiet kind of strength. The kind that carries the weight of 2 lives and still finds a way to be kind. The kind the world often overlooks, until it's too late. In her journal were drawings, too, small stick figures of a girl and a woman holding hands. In one, they were standing under a tree with the words, "One day," written underneath. In another, they were sitting at a table with plates full of food, both smiling. That was her dream. Not riches, not toys. Just a table, some food, and a mother who didn't have to cry when the bills came. Her innocence lived in those drawings, and Mr. Harris knew then he hadn't just found a student who needed help. He'd found a girl who had been saving someone else for so long, she forgot how to save herself. Mr. Harris sat alone in his classroom after school. The hall's quiet, the chairs stacked, the lights dimmed. He kept staring at her journal, replaying every moment. The fake smiles, the empty desk, the weightless bag. How had he missed it? How had a child been starving under his often missed the real lessons? Hunger, fear, loneliness. The things no report card could show, the things that lived between the lines. And this girl, she wasn't a student in need. She was a lesson he had to learn the hard way. He remembered his own childhood then, how he used to bring extra snacks because his mom worked nights and packed him too much. He used to give them to friends without thinking. But somewhere along the way, as he grew older, he stopped noticing who had what. He stopped looking. That was the problem with adulthood. It dulled your sense of wonder, and worse, your sense of The next morning, Mr. Harris waited by her desk before the bell rang. She stepped in, her shoulders drawn tight as always, expecting silence or routine. But instead, he gently placed a paper bag in front of her. Nothing said, just the bag. She froze, staring at it. The room around her blurred. No one else noticed. "It's for you," he said softly, almost afraid of shattering the delicate air between them. "Just in case you're hungry." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes shimmered, wide and confused. She didn't reach for the bag right away. Instead, she looked at him. Not like a student looks at a teacher, but like a drowning child sees a hand reaching through the surface. There was fear there, yes, calm, her shoulders a little less tense, and when she caught Mr. Harris watching, she didn't hide the sandwich or tuck it away. She held it up and smiled again, as if saying, "You helped me breathe today." In that silent exchange, a bond was forged. Stronger than rules, stronger than grades, human, honest, healing. From that day on, she wasn't just the girl who skipped lunch. She was the girl who reminded everyone that sometimes the smallest kindnesses are the ones that save lives. And Mr. Harris, he became more than a teacher. He became a protector. Because when someone dares to be vulnerable, the least we can do is meet them with open hands and a heart that says, "You are not alone anymore." A week after the lunch began showing up on her desk, she left something behind. A folder. Not homework, not drawings, just a worn folder, the edges curling. Her silence was stitched together by desperation and duty. She had built her life around keeping her mother safe, even if it meant staying invisible, even if it meant going hungry, hiding tears, lying with a smile. That kind of burden doesn't just grow overnight. It's passed down, absorbed, carried like a secret inheritance. She was living in survival mode, and survival had rules. Stay small, stay quiet, never let anyone see the cracks. Mr. Harris looked around his classroom, suddenly aware of how fragile these kids were. How many of them might be hiding behind neat handwriting and clean shirts borrowed from cousins? How many were trained to not cry, to not complain, to not trust? It shattered something in him. He thought he knew what pain looked like. He thought he could spot it. But now he saw how wrong he'd been. Pain didn't always scream. Sometimes, it simply sat quietly at the back of the room and turned in its homework on time. That evening, he made a call. Not to report her, not to intervene with a system that might make things worse, but to a local community support group. Quiet, discreet, compassionate. He asked if there was a way to help without taking control. A way to lift the weight without taking away her power. Because what she needed wasn't rescue. It was reinforcement. Someone who saw her strength and finally matched it. She stammered. But her voice cracked, and something in her eyes broke through the wall she'd built for months. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered. "I'm not stealing." Mr. Harris knelt beside her, gently resting a hand near the bag. Then, "Tell me what it is," he said softly. She opened the zipper, and inside were neatly packed sandwiches, juice boxes, apples. In what she did. It was in who she chose to be, despite everything. Mr. Harris knew then, this wasn't just a story of a girl being rescued. This was a story of a girl who became the rescue, who found purpose in the cracks of her own heartbreak. And suddenly, everything shifted. The mission wasn't just about helping her anymore. It was about helping her help others, about fueling her fire instead of smothering it with pity. The twist wasn't tragedy. The twist was hope. She never once asked for help. Not when she skipped meals, not when she walked to school in the rain with wet shoes, not when her grades dipped from exhaustion, and not even when her mother's illness forced her to grow up faster than any child should. Her sacrifices were quiet, woven into routines, masked by politeness. She'd learned long ago that asking made things worse, that silence protected the people she loved. So she carried the weight on her own, hoping someone would notice, but preparing herself in case they didn't. Mr. Harris discovered more, piece by piece. She hadn't gone on a field trip all year, not because she didn't want to, but because the $5 fee was 2 meals. She never brought treats on birthday days, not because she forgot, but because buying cupcakes meant missing dinner. She always offered to erase the board or help clean up. Not because she loved chores, but because it gave her access to leftover snacks in the teacher's lounge trash. None of it was for attention. All of it was survival. All of it was sacrifice. One day when she stayed behind to help again, Mr. Harris gently asked her, "Why don't you ever think about yourself?" She looked confused, then shrugged. "Because if I fall apart, there's no one left to fix things." That answer haunted him. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was matter of fact. She didn't know any other way to live. Her silence wasn't a choice. It was armor. And her sacrifices weren't for show. They were promises. Promises to stay strong. Promises to protect her mother. Promises to not become a burden. Even when others bullied her for wearing the same shoes every day, she never lashed out. Even when teachers assumed she was lazy for dozing off in class, she didn't defend herself. She just took it, quietly. Because arguing took energy, and hers was reserved for keeping her world from falling apart. She suffered, but without asking the world to care. And somehow, that made her strength even more humbling. She was proof that not all heroes wear capes. Some just quietly give up everything for the people they love. Mr. Harris realized then, the loudest cries don't always come with sound. And the strongest warriors aren't the ones who fight back. They're the ones who never stop showing up, even when no one sees the battle. Her silent sacrifice wasn't weakness. It was love in its rawest, most heartbreaking form. And he vowed, from that day forward, she would never have to suffer in silence again. Mr. Harris sat alone that night, replaying every moment he had overlooked, Every time her hollow eyes met his and he looked away, too busy to notice. No more. He wasn't just moved. He was angry. Angry that the world could break a child like this. Angry that systems praised grades but failed to see hunger behind straight A's. He'd been a teacher for over a decade, but tonight, something shifted. This wasn't just a student anymore. This was not rescue. But that wasn't enough. He wanted to protect her long term. So he met with the principal and proposed a new initiative, Lunch for All. An inclusive, anonymous meal program where no one would know who needed help, because everyone could take part. No applications, no shame, just food. When asked why he was pushing so hard, he simply said, "Because hunger doesn't raise its hand." The initiative passed, and every day after that, she picked up lunch with a smile, knowing others were doing the same. She didn't feel different anymore. She felt seen and safe. But his protection didn't stop at school. He connected with a trusted local organization that quietly supported low-income families with no government tracing, just human care. He gave them the mother's name, letting them believe it was a general referral. Nothing that would alert social services, just warmth, food, and healing. He checked in every week, making sure the help continued. Not once did he tell the girl. She didn't need to know. Because protection wasn't about praise. It was about peace. Inside, Mr. Harris had changed. He used to think a good teacher delivered lessons. Now he knew better. A good teacher watches for silence, for shadows, for signs that someone is breaking in plain sight. And then they step in. Not because it's their job, but because it's what decent people do. He had made a silent vow to her that day, and with every step forward, he kept it. She would never be alone in this world again. Not while he was still breathing. Mr. Harris couldn't sleep. Even as the girl's life slowly found balance, he couldn't shake the weight pressing against his conscience. The truth hit him hardest late at night. She had been hurting in front of him all year, and he'd missed it. Not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. He had assumed that no news meant no trouble, that quiet meant calm, that good grades meant a good life. Now he saw how dangerous those assumptions were. He hadn't ignored her, but he also hadn't seen her. He remembered her first week in his class, how she always showed up early, sat in the back, eyes down, how she flinched when spoken to too loudly, how she never made eye contact. And he remembered thinking, she's just shy. That simple label had covered so much pain. How many children had he labeled before? How many had he let slip through the cracks because they didn't cry loud enough? The guilt was quiet but relentless. Not loud enough to drown him, but deep enough to anchor itself in his soul. And then there were moments he couldn't forget. The day she asked for an extension on a simple assignment and he said no, thinking it would build discipline. The time she looked pale and he told her to get more sleep. The day he gave out free snacks for a class game and she quietly pushed hers into her bag instead of eating it. Every moment replayed now with new meaning. He hadn't meant harm, but intent didn't erase impact. His silence had helped the world hurt her, but regret didn't paralyze him. It ignited him. He started talking to other teachers, training them to notice the signs. He invited social workers to speak at faculty meetings, pushing for deeper understanding of poverty trauma. He revised classroom rules that penalized students for being late or unprepared. And most importantly, he began looking, really looking at his students. Not for grades, but for quiet signals. The missed meals, the tired eyes, the too small shoes, His redemption was slow, steady, and lived in small, deliberate choices. He could never erase the moments he failed her, but he could make sure they never repeated. And one morning, as she handed him a card with her newly improved test scores, he smiled. Not just because she was doing better, but because she trusted him enough to share the win. It wasn't a loud moment, but it was redemptive. "Thank you," he whispered. She didn't respond, just smiled and nodded. That was enough. Because sometimes redemption doesn't need grand speeches, just presence, just change, just showing up when it matters. It had been 3 weeks since the silent rescue began, since the girl unknowingly became the reason for change in a system that had once overlooked her. Mr. Harris had kept his distance, careful not to break her. Pride, but never once took his eyes off her well-being. He thought things were stable. He believed the worst was over, until she didn't show up to school on Monday. No absence notice, no message. Her desk sat empty like a paused story. His instinct screamed, but his logic held him back. Maybe she was just sick. Maybe. By Tuesday, that illusion crumbled. He called the front office. No one had heard from her. He drove by the address listed in her file only to find a boarded-up unit, vacant, silent, forgotten. Panic clawed at his chest. Had he acted too late? Had the help not been enough? He called the shelter quietly, supporting her family. They hadn't heard from her mother in 5 days. The woman who always texted "thank you" after every grocery delivery had gone silent too. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. The next morning, just as Mr. Harris was about to contact social services, his last resort, a folded piece of paper was found taped to the school's back entrance. It was weather-worn and barely legible. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. "Tell Mr. H thank you. Don't worry, we're okay. Had to go, I'll be back. I promise." No name. No return address. Just that message. It was both relief and heartbreak. She was alive, but gone. Out there in a city that had already asked too much of her. He sat in his car, the note trembling in his hands, and asked himself the question no teacher wants to face. Had he done enough? That thought haunted him. He could still see her face. The determined smile, the tired eyes. She had slipped through the cracks once. Now she was slipping through again. But just as the despair threatened to consume him, a memory resurfaced. Unless someone chose to be. That night, he made a choice. He stood before the school board and gave the speech of his life. He didn't ask for more textbooks. He didn't ask for new rules. He asked for eyes, trained eyes in every classroom. He asked for teachers to become more than lesson givers. He asked for humanity. "You don't know their stories," he said, voice thick with grief. "You don't see what they carry, but I did. And I swear, I will never be blind again." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. His pain became a torch. Within weeks, his call sparked a ripple. A mentorship program launched. Teachers began meeting weekly to flag quiet students, not to punish, but to check in. A grant was secured for meals, supplies, even emotional counseling. And though the girl still hadn't returned, her story became the heartbeat of the school's awakening. Every change carried her spirit. She was missing, but she was everywhere. In the classroom chairs that no longer felt so cold. In the eyes of other silent fighters. In every student who, for the first time, felt seen. And then, one rainy Friday morning, she returned. No announcement, no dramatic entrance. Just a knock on the classroom door, soaked hoodie, shy smile, and eyes that looked surprised the world hadn't forgotten her. Mr. Harris couldn't speak. He just stared, overwhelmed by the collision of fear and relief. She looked thinner, but stronger somehow, older. like someone who had faced another storm and survived. "You kept your promise," he whispered. She nodded. "So did you," she said. That was all. No explanation. None needed. The circle had closed, but something in her bag caught his attention again. As she sat, he noticed the same worn backpack. A corner stuck out from its zipper, a piece of paper with colorful scribbles. "What's that?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then pulled it out. A drawing. Dozens of stick figures holding hands, standing under a sun with the words, "Thank you for feeding us." Each name was a child, kids from the shelter, children she'd kept feeding even while missing school. "I made sure they were okay," she said softly, "even if I wasn't." It wasn't just a return, it was a revelation. The class sat in silence. Even the rowdiest students quieted. There was something sacred in that moment, watching her bravery, her quiet leadership. She wasn't just another kid. She was a spark, a revolution wrapped in humility. And Mr. Harris knew then, with complete clarity, that the true inspiration of the story wasn't the rescue. It was her resilience, her refusal to break, her instinct to lift others even when she had nothing left to give. At the year's end, she stood before the school, not to receive an award, but to give a speech. Her voice was steady, her eyes full of purpose. "Sometimes people think strength is loud," she said, "but strength can be quiet too. It can be a girl showing up to school even when her stomach's empty. It can be a teacher noticing. It can be someone leaving a bag of groceries without a name." The auditorium fell silent. "I'm not the only one," she added. "There are more. Just look closer." And they did. That day, students clapped not out of duty, but because they understood. For the first time, they really understood. The girl who had once gone unnoticed was now unforgettable. Her story, born from pain, had become a beacon. Her silence, once mistaken for weakness, had become a legacy. The suspense of her disappearance had shaken them, but her return inspired something greater. A school transformed, a teacher redeemed, and a girl, once hidden, now shining like the sun she had drawn on her paper. No longer invisible, no longer alone. The seasons shifted. Summer arrived not with silence, but with celebration. The girl, once a shadow at the back of the class, walked across the stage to collect her certificate. She wasn't the top student. She wasn't valedictorian. But when she stood there, every teacher, every classmate, every parent in the auditorium rose to their feet. Not for her grades, but for her strength, for her story. Because everyone knew, this girl was the reason everything changed. Mr. Harris watched from the wings, a gentle smile on his face, eyes misted but steady. This was the moment he had prayed would come. Not a dramatic rescue, not a headline, but healing. A steady, lived, quiet healing. He didn't need recognition. He didn't want thanks. All he wanted years. Lunch for All became a district-wide model. Students began mentoring one another. The girl's story was never used as pity. but as proof. Proof that one person's invisible struggle can light the path for many. She didn't become famous. She didn't need to. She became an example. One that whispered, "Look closer, listen harder, love better." And as the sun set on graduation day, she walked home carrying something more valuable than any diploma, a future she owned. A future not handed to her, but earned through quiet courage. Behind her, a teacher watched proudly, knowing this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because from that point on, every student like her would be seen, would be fed, would be fought for. The pain had turned to purpose, the silence into strength, and the story into hope.